welcome to another cup of coffee with me, Sandy. Today, my guest is a lady who is part of a unique group of women in the world. She is a female rabbi, and which in itself is very different. But moreover, she's actually married to a rabbi. She is married to Rabbi Benjamin Stanley. And I don't know if you recall seeing the interview that I did with him a short while ago. His terminology is they are life partners. So now you are going to meet his life partner, who is Rabbi Leah Jordan. So,
yes, I can see you.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine. And thank you for joining us today and taking the time. I can hear from your accent that you're American.
Yes, yes.
Where were you born?
I was born in Kansas City, right in the middle of the United States. And that's where I grew up. I went to uni near there even. So I didn't leave the Kansas City area until I was 23.
Okay. So you were educated there. And when did you decide that you wanted to become a female rabbi?
When I was quite young, I look back now and I think I must have been quite a keen kid because I was 12 and I was studying for my bat mitzvah at my Reform synagogue in Kansas City. Yeah. And I think I got lucky. I got some great teachers. I had a wonderful teacher for my Torah portion named Ida Moore and a wonderful chazan, a cantor named Cantor Silbersher, and they were my two tutors. And I met with them weekly and talked about my bat mitzvah and my Torah portion and practiced it with them. And they were great. They just would answer any question I had. And I remember I started to ask them questions. And then I got this sense that behind every answer they gave me were 6 other things that linked away from it to other things, and that everything was interconnected. And it was something my mother had always said to me about the Jewish tradition in her layperson's way. She'd always said it's a way of life, not just a religion. And I think I started to really get that when these 2 teachers just gave so much time to all of my questions, and that they would link it to festivals and books and ways of thinking. And it got me excited. I started to think, okay, like if this is what Jewishness is, it's about stories, it's about being with people, it's about making meaning. And I started to think about wanting to become a rabbi, which was very unusual for my family. They were a progressive Jewish family who were quite involved, but no one in the family was a rabbi. So it was a new thought, I think, in the family.
And then you left the United States. Yes. And you came to the UK. Where did you go?
So first, I actually went to Jerusalem when I was 23. When I left the Kansas City area after uni, I went to Jerusalem for a year to study, thinking I would become a progressive rabbi. And that's where I met Benji, my now life partner, who I'm married to, who you know from.
Yes. And I love his expression of life partner, because I think it is so special. It is so full of meaning. It's far more meaningful than saying, I'm married. Married is a word and it's a ring on the finger, but a life partner it's for life. And this is what I said to Rabbi Benji when he had a cup of coffee with me. So you were in Jerusalem for a year?
Yes, I was in Jerusalem for a year, and Benji was also studying there, coming from London, and I was coming from the US. And he also was studying at the beginning of his studies to become a rabbi. And we were on the same program for that year in Jerusalem. And we met in the first week that we were there and really hit it off and started dating like 3 weeks in and fell in love. It was a wonderful, to me, Jerusalem is a romantic city. And I often tell this to people and they say, well, you know, that might be your experience, but it's also, you know, a very hard place and a very mystical place. But yeah, for me, I think of that as like a wonderful time of us getting together.
But your heads were then on the same page, because after 3 weeks, knowing really that this was going to be your life partner, the man of your dreams. You had met him when you were new there, he was new there, and you were both studying.
Yes. And I mean, it's funny because I think I jinxed myself, as it were, because I went to Jerusalem and I said, do not date a rabbinical student. Do not date a rabbinical student. And then I ended up doing that. So I surprised myself. Yeah.
And with no regrets, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
then you were there for a year.
Mhm.
And how long does it take for a female rabbi to become a female rabbi?
So it's the same as for any person studying. It's usually, most programs are between 4 to 5 years, sometimes 6, after having done an undergraduate degree. So unless you're in the ultra Orthodox world, in the Haredi world,
Right.
outside of that, whether it's Masorti or modern Orthodox or any of the other progressive movements, you do an undergraduate degree and then you apply to one of the rabbinical school programs, and then it's usually a 4 to 6 year track. So mine was 5 years, and that was that first year, and so then I had 4 more years to go. And I had a bit of an unusual journey because I started doing a United States course, and then didn't like it very much and transferred in the end, halfway through, to Leah College in London.
So many of the rabbis that I am aware of went through Leo Beck.
Yes.
And I think Rabbi Benji did as well.
Yes, he did. And so that's where he was studying when I met him, and that was who had sent him to Jerusalem. Exactly.
Okay. So he first went to Leo Beck, and then he went to Israel, and then he came back.
Yes, and in fact, that was how the program was then. You applied to Leo Beck, and then they sent you as the first year of their program to Jerusalem.
Okay.
So that's why he was there.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you're also very fluent in languages. How did that come about? For an American, that's very strange. A lot of Americans don't even have passports. They don't even travel outside of America.
Yeah.
So,
I wish I was more fluent than I am, but I love languages and I love literature, and I think it's all related to loving story and how people communicate. And so I took both Spanish and French growing up and got decent at French. I lived in Paris for a little while at uni, and have not used it in so long that it really has rusted, unfortunately.
and what about your Spanish?
My Spanish is worse than that still, because I never, went to a Spanish speaking country and lived. I think that would have really embedded it. Yeah. So I have the kind of Spanish that some people from the United States have, where they take it when they're young. And so I've got, like more than your average person's vocab, but not much more than that. You could not call me a Spanish speaker by any stretch.
No, but you've got languages.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely amazing for an American.
Yeah. And in the middle of the United States where I grew up, you are not near any border. The closest border that you've got is Mexico, and I haven't looked it up in a while, but it must be a 15, 20-hour drive. So you're far from other countries.
You're in Missouri.
Yeah, the Kansas City, Missouri is the city center, and then the suburbs stretch across both state lines into Kansas and Missouri. And most of the Jewish community, including myself, grew up on the Kansas side. So I'm a Kansan, with the city center in the other state.
Okay. And when you came to the UK and you got your first post, maybe as an undergraduate post, where was that?
I was based at the Liberal Jewish headquarters, the Montague Center in Warren Street in London. Yeah. And from there, I had 2 main posts, which I really loved. I was the rabbi of Norwich Liberal Jewish Community.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I loved it. I went out a couple times a month, once or twice a month, to rabbi for them. And then the other half of the time I was working with university students and young adults. And I was the chaplain for Jewish university students. And I also did a bunch of young adult work in London, emerging Jewish community work around the kind of things that are going on at Moishe House and Open Talmud Project and other things that are kind of the 20s and 30s, which was really, really fun. And that's where I was at in my life. I was ready to travel a lot. And so I did a lot of traveling for the uni work, because I went to most of the major British universities over the course of a number of years. And I traveled a lot to Norwich. So I was on the train a lot. I got very good at, having my rucksack with all of the things I needed in it, both to sleep and to be comfortable, but also all of my Sifrei Kodesh, my Jewish
Rabbi word.
Exactly.
Yeah, and your rabbi clothes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do you wear the same rabbi clothes as Rabbi Benji?
So no, but mostly because it's a difference of shul minhag, of custom. So there are more formal synagogues like West London Synagogue, which Westminster Synagogue is a breakaway from, where you wear the full robes, still. And there are other shuls that are like that. And so I think Westminster Synagogue still is a bit more traditional in that sense. So they have, do you wear top hats ever though at Westminster? Do you know?
Not that I know. I haven't been there for quite some years, but in the times that I have been there, I've never seen anybody in a top hat. No.
Yeah. So maybe that they're not that high synagogue, but there are some that are. And then Norwich Liberal was probably in the middle. There were some people who were more formal there, but I wore regular kind of business casual wear. And then I always wear a talit, a prayer shawl when I lead services. But I don't have robes. So I know
I'm going to stop you because I don't know how many of my viewers know what a talit is. So would you like to explain it for me, please?
Yes. So a talit or a talis, there's different ways of pronouncing it, is in English a prayer shawl that Jews traditionally wear when they pray, especially the morning prayer service, and also prayer leaders wear it and partly to denote that they are leading the service. And it comes from a commandment in the Torah that says you should have fringes or tassels on the edges of your garment. And so there's an idea that we really are embodying that ritual and that commandment by wearing a prayer shawl. And interestingly, from a feminist angle, they've done scholarship on that commandment. And in the ancient Near East, most people, regardless of gender, had tassels on their corners of their garments. You can kind of imagine kind of a Near Eastern, the imagery you see in the British Museum of people walking and they have quite tasseled, like knitted wear.
Yeah.
So everyone wore it. So probably that commandment was for everyone, genuinely so, that everyone was supposed to wear something that we would now think of as a talit. So it's.
Does each tassel have a meaning?
So there's four, it says on the four corners of your garment. So there's four, and they are knotted and created in a ritualistic, standardized way that certainly is not an expertise of mine. And they're supposed to represent all of the mitzvot, all of the commandments. So together, you sometimes gather together the four corners during parts of the prayer service to remind yourself of all of the commandments. So I would suppose you could say they represent the multiplicity.
They have got representation, absolutely. And now you are a rabbi of a Leah in Stoke Newington.
Yes, of Kehillah.
I don't know what a Leah means, so please help me with that.
Yes, so Kehillah, North London, is the community I'm now the rabbi of. They are a progressive Jewish community based in Stoke Newington in Northeast London. And they're going to celebrate their 20th anniversary in a year or two. So they're not old, but they're not young anymore. And they called themselves Kehillah because Kehillah is the Hebrew word for community. So, and they wanted to kind of capture that sense that it was a community for many different kinds of people, which all synagogues, I think, are meant to be. So there's people there who are much more traditional minded. There are people there who are quite secular and everything in between. And they wanted to say, so what unites us is that we're a Jewish community. I think that was the idea. And I just started there.
Is it a big community?
I would say it's medium size.
An age group from to?
Very multi-generational, similar to Westminster Synagogue where Benji, my partner, goes. There's all ages are there. Yeah.
Okay. And what are the aims of Kehillah?
I think like all synagogues, they want to be a Jewish spiritual home for people, whatever that means for them. So I think what distinguishes Kehillah is that it's in Hackney and it's still within the city proper, in a part of the Jewish London world that used to be very Jewish in Hackney, you know? Yes. And then most of those people moved out. And the remaining community there is right next to us in Stanford Hill is the ultra Orthodox Jewish community. And so we are the only progressive, with a capital P, Jewish community in that part of London. So we're really a catch-all for anyone who wants to be Jewish in the inner city in that part of the world, but is not a member of one of the more Orthodox communities. And now there's a very sweet Masorti community that developed there over the last, I don't know how old they are, definitely the last decade or so. Maybe they're older than that. But so we're one of a few communities that really provide progressive Jewish life in Hackney, which means that, and all the things that Hackney is applies. It means there's a lot of the old guard of the community who are whose background is working class Jewish, maybe Labor Party, socialist, what you would think of when you think of Hackney Jewish life.
Sure.
And then you have this new guard moving in who are the younger generation who are part, like I am, the gentrifying element for better and for worse in the community. And they are moving back into the city because they want to have a more central London life, but they also find their way to us because they want a Jewish one. So it's that mix and everything in between.
Combination of both, yeah. And are you only open on a Friday and Saturday?
We do have events during the week, but we have Shabbat services Friday and Saturday. Not every, because we're medium sized. We decided let's choose the ones that are important, that people can put in their diary. And so we do a few Shabbat services a week rather than Friday and Saturday every week. And then we also have social events, we have learning events, we have justice events. For instance, for example, in the week and a half coming up, we have the deputy leader of Islington Council is coming to speak to us as an outside guest speaker. She herself is Jewish and belongs to a community nearby. And we're having her come to speak to us about what it is like for her to be a counselor and to be both Black and Jewish, and how that might intersect or not in the work that she does publicly in Islington. We're having a Torah learning where I'm going to teach about biblical history. We have tea with the rabbi every week where anyone who wants to can just get on Zoom, and hopefully one day it'll be in person again, but it's just a tea and chat kind of thing. All the things you would imagine a Jewish community would have.
I'm going to stop you because you mentioned that she is a Black Jewish lady. Now, I've done a little bit of research, and since 1590, it says, until the 21st century, there were very few female rabbis. But I see that there is one that is in Cleveland, Ohio. And that surprised me because I've been to Cleveland many times. I've got very close friends who live there, but didn't know that in the progressive there was a Black Jewish rabbi. And I'm going to change the subject completely, and I'm going to go through to a rabbi marrying a rabbi. Again, doing research, and I don't know if my research is correct. There are very few couples. How many couples do you know that are rabbis together?
So
worldwide.
Worldwide, I have no idea is the truth. I can tell you in Britain, which will give you a sense of, if you think of the British Jewish community and extrapolate out from that, what there might be. So I think there are less than a dozen rabbi couples in Britain, and that's grown tremendously in the last 10, 20 years. And we actually, all of us, know of each other because it's an oddity and a kind of fun thing. And we were all, as the pandemic restrictions were loosening this past summer, we were planning to have a get together and a tea where a bunch of us were going to come and sit, and who knows what we would have talked about. Just what is it like to, live in a 2-rabbi household? Do you share passions in common? Does it mean you also argue more about the things that you just, that you care about? I was very curious to see what it was going to be. And that was going to be convened by Rabbi Sybil Sheridan and Rabbi Jonathan Romaine, who are two of the more senior, I guess you could say, rabbi couples who were convening it. And then there were going to be a few others of us there. So it's an interesting question. There are more than there ever have been because I guess a number of reasons. One, because now there's equal marriage. So if there are two women rabbis, two male rabbis, it's more likely that you're going to get people who are coupled up. And also because of women rabbis to begin with, starting in the 70s, it meant that it was possible for there to even be rabbi couples, right? If you it wouldn't have been either legal for two male rabbis to marry, nor were there any female rabbis. So you didn't have rabbi couples until the last 30, 40 years, probably.
And if there are two female rabbis who get married, do they, I know when a male and a female under the chuppah, they get married, and it is the male who breaks the glass. Does that happen how does that happen in the same-sex relationship?
Yeah, so I've even seen heterosexual relationships where they've egalitarianized it and they both stomp on the glass,
Really?
or the woman stomps on the glass and then the man. And so I think it's the same with same-sex couples. You would probably have someone in the couple who might say, that's more important to me. You know, it can play out all sorts of ways. I've seen it where someone says, that matters more to me, that minhag, that custom. So can I do it? And the other one says, that's fine, that isn't my thing. Or they stomp on it together, or, you know, any combination thereof. Yeah.
Okay. Again, for the viewers who don't know what the meaning of breaking the glass, can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually within the ritual of the Jewish wedding, not a requirement. It's just it's a custom that we have added on. So you could have a Jewish wedding that would be fully spiritually, legally, halachic, as it were, that would be kosher without the breaking of the glass, but we wouldn't experience it as done, right, until we had that moment. And so there's a lot of explanations, like in anything in the Jewish tradition, there's 2 or 3 explanations people always give for it. So one is people say it's a remembrance that the world, even though it's joyous, is also broken. And so in this moment of great simcha, of great joy, we remember that this is a life partnership that goes through sorrow and joy, and that we hold the good and the bad at the same moment. And so when we cry tears of joy, we also remember what is in the world that we need to fix. And some people even go further and they say it relates specifically to our loss of the temple in Jerusalem, that we are remembering that we are not unified as a people, that we are a people who are dispersed, as we once were not. Yeah. And then people even say it probably was a Jewish folklore tradition from Europe, where loud noises were understood to scare away bad spirits.
That's what I heard.
Yes.
Years ago. That was my conception of why the glass was broken. But now I've heard different views. So it's interesting. You also just mentioned about married couples having possible discrepancies. And I know from Rabbi Benji that he is vegetarian and you are not. Yes. Which I find is absolutely magic. And how do you compromise? He says that he tries very hard to compromise, and you do as well.
Yes, I would say that's true. So one of the main ways we compromise, and it's something that I introduced, I think Benji would have rightly thought, oh, I can't introduce this because then Leah will resent me. When we moved in together after being together for 2 years, we moved together after Jerusalem, before coming together to London. We lived in New York City for a year. And that was the first time we ever shared a place, and we found a little apartment and we got together, and I said to him, I think we both want a kosher kitchen, and I think it would be better if I ate less meat, and it's just easier with kashrut if you just do a chalavi, a straight down the line vegetarian milkic, dairy kitchen. Why don't we do that at home, and then I'll eat meat out, but it'll keep me from eating as much meat. It'll mean the kashrut will be simple, and also it means you don't have to worry about, okay, is this dinner going to be, have meat in it or not at home. So that's what we've done since then. So we've done that now for a decade. And so the kitchen at my house where I'm at now is a chalavi, a dairy kitchen. It means that people who are more from can come and eat at our place, which is very important to us. Sure. And it means that I eat less meat, which is a goal of mine. But sometimes it's frustrating. So for example, today is Thanksgiving. We're recording this on US
Absolutely.
Thanksgiving. And I would like to have a turkey, but we can't cook it in the house because we
No.
haven't set up the house so we could do it. We would first of all de-kosher the house by doing it. And also we've made that agreement. And so that's worked very well. There's a few things I miss about it. And yeah, Benji is very, he also has come toward me a lot. Like when we go out to eat, he would like to only eat at vegetarian restaurants if he could, both for kosher reasons and for vegetarian reasons. And so he understands like I would be sad after a while if we did that. So we go to many meat centered restaurants. So
And
I
then he
get my
has a salad or vegetables or things like that. So,
exactly.
you're both happy by the time you get home.
Yeah.
Tell me something. How do you think the rabbinate has changed as women have entered?
It's a really interesting question. I was just talking about it to a young male colleague of mine because his mother was one of the first female rabbis in Britain, and now he's a rabbi, and so he can see what she did to change him. I think he agreed.
Okay, you seem to have a
You
little
know,
problem with the connection. So would you repeat that, please?
yeah, sure. I was just saying to another young male rabbi colleague of mine that I saw the way his mother, who was one of the first female rabbis in Britain, had changed the profession. And he agreed with me, which is that in the old world, where in a couple it was a man and a woman, and the man, it was assumed, was working more and bringing in the salary for the household, then he really gave his whole life to the rabbinate. So a male rabbi, for example, my rabbi who married Benji and me and who married my parents actually and did my baby naming. So he was really our family rabbi. He worked originally, he said to me when he was young, a 60, 70-hour week, right? And he never saw his wife and he rarely saw his kids. And when women entered the rabbinate, they said, this is untenable. We cannot have, families and children and care for our aging parents and have friendships and have a life outside if we're giving 60 to 70 hours to the congregation. So I think the main thing that women brought was a notion of work-life balance, which was very good and actually was good for the male rabbis because they were killing themselves. They gave everything to the synagogue and then they had nothing left. So that's a huge thing that I've noticed shift. That's brought a good thing for everyone because you can have a life outside of congregational work in a way that you couldn't, I think, in the mid 20th century. That's a
And
big
you
one.
do enjoy inviting people into your home,
Yeah.
whether they are Orthodox, whether they are liberal, whether they are non-Jewish.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, I think is so open-minded because years ago it was not like that.
Yes.
So that is really, in my head, that's very progressive. Now, I know that both you and Rabbi Benji love literature, love the Torah. When you've got your time together, what do you discuss?
If we're discussing Jewish things, what do we discuss or what in general?
Yeah, in general, as two young people, what do you discuss?
We discuss a lot of politics. I'm, about the US and the UK and what's going on. Because I always keep up with the US news and want to know what's going on with it. We watch silly TV programs and
what do you watch?
All sorts of stuff. Let's see. What did we just binge? We just we're in the middle. So this sounds highbrow, but it's not always like this. We're watching right now Steve McQueen's BBC series on various moments that he captures in Black history in Britain. Have you seen this? It's called
No.
It's very good. The first one is about the Mangrove Nine, who were who 9 people who protested against the police in Notting Hill and then were charged for riot. So it was really, really good. So, but we also just watch silly things like, what have we watched recently?
What kind of humor have you got? If you're watching something that is
Yeah,
humorous, what's
yeah.
your kind of humor? You being American, him being English.
Yeah, in British. Well, we'll find things that one of us will like more than the other, and we'll introduce it to each other. So we watched the thick of it, and it took me a while to understand it because it was so British, and then I got really into it and I loved it. And then he'll go the other way, and we'll watch some US thing. Sometimes we watch sketches of Saturday Night Live, which is our
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
know it well.
yeah. Um, what so it could be, it's often, and that's what's nice about a bicultural relationship, you introduce each other to your stuff. So I'll say, watch this little thing, and I'll kind of explain who the person is in their context in the US, and he'll still do that with me in the UK. Like, I've been here 9 years, but I think the number one thing that makes you an immigrant, even as an English speaker, as someone who speaks, quote, the native language of the place, is that I'll never know all of the actors and presenters and journalists and references, like all those things that you take for granted when you grew up in a country. I'll never know them. So he's always explaining to me, who is this writer? What is this a reference to from 1995 in British life? That's kind of fun. That's like a fun part of
You've
our
got so much to share.
yeah,
Because you're
yeah,
America and Britain, and there is culture, there is education, there is communication. So
yes,
it's a wonderful sharing. And I asked him, when he relaxes, what
yeah.
does he do? So I'm going to ask you the same question. When you relax, just unwind, what do
Yeah.
you do? What's
So
fun for you?
I would call myself a geek. Uh, a, I have like loves from childhood and adolescence and young adulthood that I keep returning to. So I'm rereading for the millionth time Harry Potter in second lockdown. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And that brings me great joy because it's something that's familiar and well paged, and I have, my feelings from reading it when I was 13, and my feelings from reading it when I was 20 and 30, and now this reread.
How has it changed? You see things differently?
I do. One of the main things I see differently is because we've gone through this 4 or 5 years of divisive politics and the rise of populism and nationalism. I understand more now the cynicism that's actually in a good way in the series, that she makes out that we are easily manipulated, and we often give speeches where we say one thing and mean another. That's a lot of the series is like that. And I see more now, as I grow older, what's going on there in that commentary. So that's really nice. That's a nice side of Harry Potter that gets richer. There's parts of it that feel more dated, like if she wrote it now, I think for better and for worse, there would be more notion of identity politics in it, meaning there's one named Jewish character in the whole series, and he's very minor. And then sometimes you feel like stereotypes crop up around different people, including Jews, like in the books. And I notice that more than I used to notice it. So there's critiques, and there's wisdom as well in it. More and more.
It's amazing to read books, even going back, say, to Enid Blyton,
For
which you
sure.
may or may not have read. When
Yes.
you read it as a child, 5 or 6 years, and
Yeah.
then you read it again when you are reading it to your 5 or 6-year-old,
Yeah.
3-year-old, 4-year-old today,
Yeah.
because they start reading so early. And you see a different meaning to
Absolutely.
when you were reading it as a child. So all books have got different meanings as you grow older, and you are far more educated, and your brain has got far more absorption.
Exactly. So I love those kind of things. I return to things that comforted me in various times, and when I'm really like just relaxing, I'm watching an old TV program that I love, or I'm reading an old book that I've read a million times before. Yeah, that's what I like.
Okay, if it was your last TV program that you were going to watch, what
Ever.
would it be?
Uh, I don't know. It would either be, and this is the geek again in me, I would either watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Star Trek would be what I would.
Wow. Mine would be Casablanca.
Casablanca is a wonderful
I
film.
think I have watched it 2 million times, and each time I watch it, I see it with different eyes, And although I know the script virtually backwards, it's still brand new to me. And it never dates and it never ages. And it always makes me feel happy.
Yeah,
So
I know exactly what you mean.
it,
That's a wonderful film.
yeah, it's just amazing. My last question to you is, when you go outside, outdoors, you
Mhm.
and Rabbi Benji together go walking. Are you sporting at all besides being a geek? He plays football. He says not very well, but he plays football. What about
Yeah.
you?
I love to walk a lot. I love to ramble around, and I play tennis very poorly. I certainly can't claim any great skill in it. And I would like to cycle more. That's a big goal of mine in lockdown. I can see how it gives people joy to be cycling around when we can't really use public transport. Um, I'm not, I'm geeky, but not completely ineffectual when it comes to physical stuff. Like I like to put things together. I'm more of the handy person in the house. For instance, I put up our sukkah every year.
No way.
So I can do some stuff. I'm not brilliant at any of those things, but I enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you do all the heavy stuff.
Yeah. I always joke that if I didn't live here, eventually Benji would be living in the dark because he never changes a light bulb.
Okay, and one day, please God, when you have children, do you
Yeah.
think you're going to change a nappy?
Yes, he better. He knows if he doesn't, that I will be very upset with him. So
On that note, I don't want you, Rabbi Leah, and I don't want Rabbi Benji to have any fallout over
I don't think
anything like that, and I'm sure that you won't. And it has been an absolute joy and a pleasure to hear all about you and to learn so much. So I say thank you so much for taking time to have a cup of coffee with me. And I saw while we were talking, you also had a sip of coffee or
yeah,
tea or something. So to my viewers, I say I hope that you have found this interesting. I hope that you have learned as much as I have. And until we meet again, although today is Thanksgiving and you are American, happy Thanksgiving. This will not be going out Thanksgiving time, but whenever it does, it's always good, especially now, to say happy anything. Just
yeah,
let's bring happiness back into our lives. So
yeah.
thank you. Until I see everybody again, thank you for having a cup of coffee with me and my guest, Rabbi Leah Jordan. Take care, God bless, and see you again. Thank you.
God bless.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Understand.
Thank you. Bye-bye.